Speaking of justified, I lived in Seattle for a little bit, and pretty liberal town. Met some nice people out there. Well, they've made some national news lately. Have you heard of the CHAZ? What is the CHAZ? Well, got several hundred people. I think most of them are hippies. I think that's fair to say. That have decided to take over 5-6 blocks of land in a no-police zone. And a lot of people are getting criticized for that. And then the other side are saying, listen, these people are not violent. We want to know exactly what's going on down there. So we have a great reporter on the line with us right now, and she works at a great radio station that I actually used to work at back in the day. That would be Cairo Radio in Seattle, reporter Hannah Scott. Hannah, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on. So we wanted to get firsthand knowledge from you because you've been down there. How many times have you been in the CHAZ?
I've been there about 3 times so far since it's become CHAZ. I was up there prior to that when that was a kind of a protest line, and you had, the tear gas and flashbangs and things going off for a week or so before.
Gotcha. Okay, so you hear from some people that are saying these people are violent. They're forcing businesses to pay them. What can you tell us? What have you seen? What do you know? Is it violent? What is it like down there? Set the scene.
It's absolutely not violent. And if you've been to Seattle before, Capitol Hill is kind of our trendy, younger person, hippie kind of area. And it's very much like that. It looks like a street fair, a growing street fair at this point, where there's hundreds of people. I mean, the weekend was packed with like a giant farmer's market. You have various people. There's a park just kind of inside the zone where you have different kind of teach-ins and speak-ins going on. You have DJ booths at night. It's loud. So what I've heard from some of the people in the neighborhood is that they're a bit annoyed with some of the noise, with, loudspeakers and music going on up to 11 or so at night. So there's kind of a request at this point to possibly agree upon a quiet hour. I've not seen any violence. I will say that there are those who are kind of the guards, if you will, of the zone who are armed, but not openly armed. This is you can open carry in this state, although the mayor of Seattle has kind of prohibited that in that particular neighborhood. That is still going on, but they say it's to protect themselves from any bad actors, any kind of, others who might come from the outside to try to cause harm. So I have not seen any violence at all.
I'm glad to hear that, Hannah. And again, this is firsthand knowledge. You've been there. A lot of the people, I've heard some people, some conservative radio talk show host, even here in Las Vegas, that are saying these people in the CHAZ, they should go to Guantanamo Bay and spend the rest of their life in jail. I've heard other Republicans say they're scum of the earth and throw them all in jail for the rest of their lives. And I certainly don't agree with that. Based on what you are telling me, I would assume you wouldn't agree with that. Have you had some interactions with some of these people? I would imagine you've interviewed some of these people. What are they like?
Yeah, absolutely. I've interviewed many of them, and they're all up there for different, kind of causes. So you have the Black Lives Matter movement that we're seeing, here in the state, here in Seattle, across the country right now in the wake of George Floyd's death. And it kind of starts as something like that, but then you also have a lot of the younger white crowd up there who are always fighting for tax Amazon kind of things, where we want to tax big business and then homelessness and things of that nature. They don't want a police presence at all. They've taken the East Precinct right there inside of that zone and spray painted over it and call it the Seattle People's Department. They want to police themselves. They want to feed themselves. There's community gardens inside of this zone at this point. And it's that kind of a vibe. Again, very hippie-ish. It is not at all any type of threatening thing. I've had no problems. I know there was another reporter who was with our local Fox News affiliate, and she was targeted a bit by kind of one bad actor who spoke out against Fox as a whole, and she was kind of pushed around and had to go into a fire station to hide out that evening. That is the most of any kind of violence that I've seen.
So let me ask you this, Hannah. What would you say, and why? Why are there people out there that are throwing rumors around that some of the businesses have to pay these people? Why are people throwing those types of rumors around that these people are violent criminals? What would you say to those people, and where do these rumors and conspiracy theories even come from?
Well, I will tell you what happened. Last week, our assistant Seattle police chief came out and held a very brief press conference. Well, she didn't take very many questions from reporters, and she said, and this again is our assistant, not our police chief, assistant police chief, she said that they had kind of anecdotal reports of businesses being extorted for protection money. And I've never in my life as a reporter heard something like that from a official, that it was not backed up. She didn't take questions about it afterwards. And a couple of days later, there was another press conference where I specifically asked our Seattle police chief, have you had any legitimate reports from businesses about this happening? And she said no, they had not, only anecdotal reports. So that was walked back, but it took 2 days to get that answer. And in that time, you had this just blowing up. You had the president tweeting about it. You had all of the very conservative media just jumping all over it. But no, that's not happening.
So the police chief, Carmen Best, she actually made a statement a couple days ago that it's now taking roughly 3 times as long to get to any type of situation that's happening inside the Capitol Hill autonomous zone because of the fact that it's created the way it is with the security, et cetera. What have you heard about that?
And that's absolutely true, and that is really the biggest concern right now. So their explanation for why they decided to shut everything down at the police precinct at the time was because they had a legitimate threat that there was perhaps going to be a fire set at the East Precinct. Someone was going to target that, so they left. They intended to go back, and then that just hasn't happened yet. But then the police chief did come out and say that now that because we have the barricades up, it's difficult to get any first responders, fire in there. So the fire chief for Seattle has been out there talking with the people in this zone, trying to make sure that they can get in and out. And I don't know that that's really happened at this point. And it's definitely a concern. There's been no violent reports of crime where something like that would have been needed, like a police response or a medical emergency, to my knowledge at this point. But certainly they want to make sure that they can get in there faster should that need to happen. But there's no dialogue really going on right now because it's unclear who exactly is in charge as far as those who have occupied this neighborhood.
And so when they call themselves an autonomous zone, can you explain why that is and what that really means?
Again, kind of that they want to police themselves, be in charge of their own community, whether it's providing food for themselves from the community garden or their own protection with those who are kind of manning the barriers there with their weapons on them in case there's any bad actors coming out. I want to point out they've changed the name in the last 24 hours. It's now called TOP, which stands for Capitol Hill Occupied Protest or Organized Protest. It goes both ways.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Hannah Scott. She is a reporter over there at Cairo, a station I worked at back in the day. We're talking about CHOP or CHAZ, whatever you want to call it, one or the other. It sounds like CHOP. That sounds like a nice restaurant or something.
A very good steakhouse.
Right.
All right. So Hannah, here's my opinion on this whole situation, and you've seen it firsthand, so I want to get your take on this. You could tell me if you agree with me or not. I don't think any zone in any part of the country should be a no police zone because, God forbid, something horrible happens in this 5 or 6 blocks, whether someone having a medical episode or, God forbid, there's one bad actor that pulls out a gun and shoots somebody. We need cops everywhere. So I don't really agree what they're doing, and I don't agree with the right painting most of these people out to be terrorists. I think there needs to be middle ground here. Don't you think it would be a show of good faith if they let some police officers in there? Keep doing what you're doing. Have fun, mellow out, all that stuff. But just let a few cops in there and just have some sort of compromise. That way everybody's happy. Will you agree or disagree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think the fact that you even have to say let a couple of cops in there is a problem.
It's a huge issue.
It sets a bad precedent to show that, hundreds of people can take over a police precinct and chase the cops out of there. I get why they did it. I was up at those protests where it really did look like a war zone a week before this zone was created. But I also saw many of the bad actors in those protests just hurling glass bottles at the cops and really trying to instigate. I've been here for more than a decade. I covered the Occupy movement here. It's very similar to that kind of a vibe where you have some of those bad actors trying to instigate that police response, so that becomes part of the larger discussion. But you cannot, it's not just their area. One of the arguments they'll make is that we pay for these streets. We're the taxpayers. Well, so is everyone who lives there, who needs an emergency responder, and who maybe likes the police protection. You've got to have some sort of order. So they need to find a dialogue to start and get back in there as soon as possible, in my opinion.
Well, and then last night I saw that there was actually a line of protesters that were outside the West Precinct. Do you think that there will be an effort to get to that? And from what I understand, the West Precinct is responsible for the 911 calls, but do you think there will be an effort to get that abandoned and turn that into another autonomous zone or another CHOP?
I think that I've definitely heard that could be something, that there's a group inside of these protesters that they wanted. It's, I believe, the third time they've marched down to that area yesterday. The city can't let the West Precinct fall. It's just given where it's at, given what it does. And you can't, period, you cannot let another police station precinct fall at this point. I know many officers who are, morale is down. It's a problem here at this point. So there's got to be some kind of action. I think that needs to happen this week, and you absolutely can't let any marchers come and try to take over the West Precinct.
Hannah, can you give us an update on that? And I guess this would be my last question for you. Can you give us an update on negotiations? How long do you see this thing going for? Why is the mayor and why are there so many people in Seattle with power that are just allowing these people to do whatever the hell they want to do? For the life of me, I just don't understand that. And I don't think these people are horrible people, by the way. I want to be very clear on that. They're not terrorists. But give me an update. Like, is anybody going to change their mind here and say, okay, guys, enough is enough? What's the latest?
The latest is that we heard from our police chief yesterday that they're trying to find out the right people to have this dialogue with to try to defuse this situation calmly so nobody gets hurt. But my sense is that there's definitely, you can't let this go on a whole another week, I don't think. How can you? It looks like a lawless area to the outside world, and it looks bad here. Now, how this is allowed to go on, it's very progressive here. We have city council members who were out there the day before the autonomous zone showed up, and they were on that protest line where things got very heated. They themselves were almost trying to instigate things with the officers because they have their own agendas where they want to defund the Seattle Police Department by half and invest that money into various community things that they feel like haven't been done for a long time. So it's very political, and I think that's how this is allowed to happen. And also now we've got a court order that bans our police department from using tear gas, flashbangs, or pepper spray against any protesters. But they have to do this carefully, but they have to do it.
And you're mentioning Teresa Mosqueda. She's the city council member that was basically instigating this entire situation. And actually, there was one business last night, I believe it was called Tender Auto Care, where one of the people inside CHAZ or CHOP actually went in, set his business on fire. He was there, he detained him, and then a group of protesters or a group of occupants of CHOP came through, knocked down his fence, and got them released. So there has been some unrest as far as the businesses go, from what I understand.
And I wasn't out there last night, so it may have happened since then. But for the most part, most of our businesses are supporting this group. The last time I was out there a few days ago, I had a business out there grilling hot dogs for the people who were in that community. You know, they're giving socks away at tents for the homeless who live in that area. But absolutely, I think the longer you leave this situation as it is, without any police, the more likely you are to see something like that happening.
Well, Hannah, I tell you, you're a really, really good reporter, and appreciate you coming on our show and taking the time. Please be safe out there. It sounds like things are going okay, and it's not violent. We're very happy to hear that. But we hope they don't harass any Fox News reporters. I'm not a big fan of Fox News, but at the same time, no reporters should be treated that way. They're just doing their job. But thank you so much for painting the scene for us, and we appreciate you, Hannah. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hannah.
There you go, Hannah Scott, Cairo Radio. I worked at Cairo Radio in Seattle back in the day. It's a pretty big radio station, one of the biggest news stations in the country. Really good reporter. She really did a good job.